How quickly can you prepare a job interview and still pass it? It's probably a question that many of you are asking, and I'll first give you the best and worst methods to prep job interviews, and then I'll talk about how can you eventually save time and boost your motivation to prep a job interview with a high-performing company. Okay, so the classic way to shortcut a job interview prep is to basically start answering as many interview questions as possible. In a bit, there won't be any others during your interview, and then you basically hope for the best. Even further here, you could use ChatGPT to answer those questions and even to clone them directly as your own answers. Okay, so this is by far the quickest method to prepare a job interview, and of course the least qualitative one of them. Your answers will basically lack depth and basically quickly fail any test, such as the backbone test in a job interview. Some of you will still pass these interviews, but I'd even argue that you'd pass them anyway, even without preparing them, because usually your employer would be desperately looking to hire someone in this scenario. Okay. Now, the other extreme, the best way to prepare a job interview by far is to focus on building your own story bank. And this usually means you'll end up with between 20 to 30 stories focused on key behaviors and with as many revisions as possible in a bid to boost the quality for each of your stories. Okay. Now, as you would expect, the main challenge with such an approach is that it takes a tremendous amount of time, even 1 year, to prepare and especially to revise your stories. Now, my method, the shortcut to interview prep I advise, is to basically start small with a simple, high-quality story bank, focusing on just a few stories, 5 to be more precise. First would be your elevator pitch, then why do you want to work for this company, dealing with an ambiguous situation, interpersonal skills, and a failure. Okay, and the process consists of 3 steps. Step 1. For each of these 5 topics, try to make a brain dump, even of several pages, with your best content. Okay, spend time to write down all you can remember of, or pitch in the case of tell me about yourself. And this will be the first version of your as simple as possible story bank. Okay, simple. Step 2. Once you have your 5 stories, it is now time to polish them a little bit. Okay, so for your elevator pitch and why this company, how can wording improve? Are there maybe some more metrics you could mention there? Or maybe you could also speak them out loud or even record yourself to see how they sound. It's basically impossible you don't find ways to improve them, but the main thing here is you spend a little bit of time on this. 30 minutes for both if you want, okay? For the subsequent stories on ambiguity and interpersonal skills, in the first step, I said that the objective would be to have a brain dump, even of several pages, with everything you can remember about these topics, about these stories. And basically now it's time to start to trim down the fat and focus on structuring them in the STAR format. See, situation, task or challenge, action, and result. Also, try to include some metrics and try to be specific as possible. Don't talk about hypothetical situations here. And finally, for your failure story, is that a real failure that you're talking about? Because usually it takes a couple of tries to do it. If it's not, try to find a better one. But if you're happy with the story itself, start making it more concise. And besides structuring the STAR format, try making your learnings or the results 50% of your STAR answer. Okay? And finally, the step 3 will have the objective you end up with a final revision of your own story bank. Okay, so for your elevator pitch and why this company, what if you ask ChatGPT for an example for your own role and seniority? Okay, and from experience, you'll usually find some interesting pointers to revise your two stories here. Okay, for next, for stories around ambiguity and interpersonal skills, you could use some commonly asked interview questions. For example, tell me about a time when you took on a complex decision in an ambiguous environment, such as when there wasn't enough data available. Okay, how does your story, how does your ambiguity story answer this specific question? Okay, and how can you, of course, further improve it? Okay, similarly here, tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a colleague. How well does your story on interpersonal skills hold here? How can you further improve it? Okay, and of course the same thing with your failure story. Okay. Now I want you to notice here that I only ask you to use ChatGPT for the introductory statements. Okay, this is where it works best. You could eventually also use it to demo other types of stories, such as for your ambiguity. Just please resist the temptation to clone them. Okay, as I said in the beginning of the video, they're hard sell if the interviewer will go for a deep dive on a story you took on from ChatGPT. Okay. Why does this approach work? Okay, so I believe that this interview prep method is designed to achieve two important goals. First, most of you will have a hard time starting your story bank. Okay, so by simplifying the process, you'll hopefully also feel more motivated to start building your story bank. And second here, revising your story is when you realize where the quality bar is for your specific scenario. Okay, so this way you will be able to also accurately predict the amount of work involved as compared to a best effort approach of coming up with 30 stories which you'll never revise. And as a closing remark here, I'm giving you this simplified interview prep method since I know, especially today, motivation plays a significant role in both prepping and during job interviews. So hopefully you found this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.